2 years in prison won't kill you. That is what my mother said across the kitchen table, her voice trembling with a terrifying mix of affection and desperation. She made a felony conviction sound like a grounded punishment. I believed them when they said it was about saving the family. I didn't know yet that they were only saving themselves, or that I would spend 730 days planning exactly how to burn them down. The fluorescent lights in the break room at my day job always hummed at a frequency that made my teeth ache. It was 5 o'clock on a Tuesday in November, and while my colleagues in the risk and compliance department were packing up their laptops and talking about happy hour at the brew pub down on 4th Street, I was mentally shifting gears for my second shift. I did not get to go to happy hour. I did not get to go home to a quiet apartment and a glass of wine. I had to drive 30 minutes west to Cedar Hollow, to the corrugated metal warehouse that housed Northline Supply, my parents' business. I was 33 years old. I had a degree in finance and a certification in corporate compliance. I managed risk assessments for mid-sized regional banks. Yet, the moment I turned my car onto the gravel drive of Northline Supply, I reverted to being Bella, the reliable one, the fixer, the one who did not need to be asked. My brother, Caleb, had moved to the coast 4 years ago to pursue acting, a venture financed largely by my parents. But I stayed. I stayed because someone had to make sure the payroll taxes were filed on time. Someone had to make sure the lights stayed on. The warehouse always smelled of diesel fumes and sawdust. When I walked into the front office, the air was thick with tension. It was a familiar heaviness, the kind that settles in a room where people are waiting for bad news. My father, George, was on the phone, his back to the door. He was hunched over the receiver, his voice tight and aggressive. "Listen to me," he said. "I told you the check is in the mail. It went out yesterday. Do not quote policy to me. I have been in this business for 40 years. He slammed the phone down before the person on the other end could respond. He turned and saw me, and for a split second, his face was unguarded. He looked old. The lines around his mouth were deep trenches, and his eyes were rimmed with red. Then the mask slid back into place. The bluster returned. "Bella," he said. "Good. You are here. I need you to look at the vendor list for the Anderson account. They are claiming we double-billed them, but they are crazy." I put my bag down on the spare chair. My mother, Elaine, was sitting at the filing cabinet, frantically looking for something. She offered me a tight, nervous smile. "Hi, honey," she said. "Thank you for coming. We are just so swamped." I sat down at the computer terminal that had been mine since high school. I logged into the accounting software. It was an old system, clunky and slow, but I knew its rhythms better than I knew my own heartbeat. I started pulling up the Anderson invoices as I worked. The unease that had been building in my gut for months began to solidify. I was a risk officer. My entire career was built on noticing patterns that did not fit. And Northline Supply was becoming a tapestry of things that did not fit. I found the Anderson invoice, then I found another one, identical in amount and date, but with a slightly different invoice number. One was marked paid, the other was marked outstanding. "Dad," I said, "you did bill them twice. Look at this." He waved a hand dismissively. "It is a glitch. The system generated a duplicate. Just void the second one." It was not just a glitch. I kept scrolling. I saw vendor refunds routed to a bank account I did not recognize. It was a local credit union account, not the primary business operating account. "What is this account ending in 4402? I asked. My mother froze near the filing cabinet. "Oh, that is just a holding account," she said quickly. "Derek said it was better for tax purposes to keep the refund liquidity separate." Derek Voss. He was the new outside accountant they had hired 6 months ago. I had never liked him. He wore suits that were too shiny and drove a car that cost more than my annual salary. He spoke in rapid-fire bursts of jargon that sounded impressive but meant nothing. He had convinced my parents that their old accountant, a slow and methodical woman named Mrs. Higgins, was a dinosaur who was holding them back. Derek promised efficiency. He promised to keep things moving. I clicked on the transaction history for the mystery account. It was active, too active. Money flowed in from refunds and flowed out in cash withdrawals or transfers to entities with vague names like HC Consulting. I do not like this. I said, I do not see the documentation for these transfers. Where are the receipts? Where are the authorization forms? My father walked over and put a heavy hand on my shoulder. It was meant to be comforting, but it felt like a restraint. You worry too much. Bella, he said, that is your problem. You always look for the disaster. Derek knows what he is doing. He is aggressive. That is what we need right now. The market is tough. We have to be creative. Creative is one word for it. I muttered. I worked for 3 hours. I fixed the duplicate invoices I could find. But for every error I corrected, I found 2 more shadows. There were payroll entries for temporary workers I had never seen on the schedule. There were depreciation schedules that made no sense for the equipment they actually owned. At 8 o'clock, I stood up. My back was stiff. I need to talk to Derek. I said, no. My mother said, her voice was sharp, do not bother him. Bella, he is very busy. We will handle it. Just go home. Get some rest. You look tired. I looked at them. Really looked at them. They were terrified. It was vibrating off them like heat off pavement. But they were my parents. I had spent 33 years seeking their approval, trying to be the good daughter who made their lives easier so they could focus on Caleb and his dreams. The habit of trusting them was a deep groove in my brain. Okay, I said, but next week, I want to sit down with the full ledger. No more holding accounts I do not know about. We will see, my father said, turning back to his paperwork. I drove home feeling a cold knot in my stomach. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself that incompetence often looked like malice, and my parents were terrible with money. They were desperate, not criminal. 2 weeks later, the letter arrived. It was a Tuesday again. I had stopped by the house to drop off a casserole because my mother had complained about her arthritis flaring up and being unable to cook. When I walked into the kitchen, the envelope was sitting in the center of the table. It was from the State Department of Revenue, Special Investigations Unit. My father was pacing the kitchen floor. My mother was sitting at the table, staring at the envelope as if it were a bomb. What is that? I asked. Though I knew the logo, my father stopped pacing. He looked furious. But beneath the fury, there was that same terror I had seen at the office. It is nothing, he said. A clerical error. These bureaucrats. They justify their jobs by harassing small business owners. They say there are discrepancies in the payroll tax filings for the last 4 quarters. 4 quarters? I said, that is a year. Dad, that is not a clerical error. That is a pattern. I reached for the letter, but my mother snatched it away. We are handling it, she said. Derek is going to write a letter. He says it is a misclassification issue with the contractors. Derek again. Let me see the books. I said, I was not asking this time. I need to see exactly what Derek filed. If the state is involved, this is serious. They do not send letters from the Special Investigations Unit for minor mistakes. You are overreacting, my father snapped. You always do this. You think you are the expert because you work in a glass tower downtown. This is the real world. Bella. Sometimes paperwork gets messy. Messy as missing a receipt, I said, my voice rising. This is tax fraud. If they think you are underreporting payroll to avoid taxes, they can shut you down. They can seize assets. Get out, my father said. I stared at him. If you are not going to help, then get out. He repeated, we do not need your judgment. We need support. I left the house, my hands shaking, but I did not go home. I drove to the warehouse. I knew my father kept a spare key under the loose brick near the loading dock, a security flaw I had told him to fix a dozen times. The office was dark. I let myself in and didn't turn on the overhead lights. I used the flashlight on my phone. I needed to know what was happening. I needed to know if I could fix it before the state came down on them. I went to the filing cabinet. It was locked. I looked around the desk. My father was a creature of habit. He kept keys in a chipped coffee mug that said, World's Okayest Golfer. I found a small silver key and tried it on the cabinet. The lock clicked open. I started rifling through the folders. vendor contracts, insurance policies, and then, in the back, a manila folder with no label. I pulled it out and opened it on the desk. The beam of my flashlight illuminated the first page. It was a scan of my driver's license, not my current one, but the one from 3 years ago. I turned the page. There was a sheet of paper covered in signatures, my signature, dozens of them. Some were shaky, some were practiced. It looked like someone had been tracing my handwriting, trying to get the loop of the B and the slant of the M just right. I felt the blood drain from my face. I kept turning the pages. There were loan applications for equipment I knew we did not have. There were credit line extensions. And at the bottom of every single document, on the line marked Chief Financial Officer or Authorized Representative, was my signature, a signature I had never written. I sat there in the dark, the silence of the warehouse pressing in on me. The realization was a physical blow. They were not just messy, they were using me. They had been building a failsafe, and I was it. The folder was labeled in my father's handwriting, but the text was small, scrawled in pencil in the corner. Backup signatures. I took pictures of everything with my phone. My hands were trembling so badly the first few images were blurry. I had to brace my elbows on the desk to steady them. I put the folder back exactly where I found it. I locked the cabinet. I put the key back in the mug. I drove home in silence. I did not sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to reconcile the parents who had paid for my piano lessons and cheered at my graduation with the people who had practiced forging my name in a dark office. 3 days later, the detective came. He came to the warehouse while I was there on my lunch break. I had taken a half day from work, unable to focus, needing to be near the scene of the crime, waiting for the other shoe to drop. He was a heavy-set man in a rumpled suit, accompanied by a woman from the state investigator's office who looked like she was made of steel and wire. "Are you Bella Morgan?" the detective asked. "Yes," I said. My parents were standing behind the counter. My mother was pale. My father looked like he was ready to fight. "We have some questions regarding the financial filings for Northline Supply," the woman said, "specifically regarding several loans secured under your name and your capacity as the CFO. "I am not the CFO," I said automatically. "I just help out." The woman pulled a document from her briefcase. It was a loan application for $50,000 from a private lender. At the bottom was my signature. Beside it, the title, Chief Financial Officer. "Is this your signature?" she asked. I looked at it. It was a good forgery. The B was perfect, but the M was too sharp at the peak. I looked at my parents. My mother's eyes were wide, pleading. She gave a microscopic shake of her head. "Don't," she was saying. "Protect us." My father's jaw was set like granite. I looked back at the investigator. I had a choice. I could lie to a state official, or I could tell the truth and incriminate my parents. "That looks like my signature," I said carefully. "But I do not recall signing this specific document." "You do not recall?" the detective asked. "It is for $50,000, Ms. Morgan. That is not something you forget. I handle a lot of paperwork." My father interjected. Stepping forward, Bella signs what I put in front of her. She trusts me. Maybe she just forgot. The investigator looked at me. Not him. "Did you sign this, Ms. Morgan? Did you knowingly authorize this loan?" I took a breath. I thought about the folder in the cabinet. I thought about the practice sheets. "No," I said, "I did not." The room went deadly silent. The investigators took notes. They asked more questions. They asked about my role, my access to the accounts, my relationship with Derek Voss. I answered honestly. I did not volunteer information about the forgery folder. I was too scared, too confused, but I did not lie about what I had done and what I had not done. When they left, the silence in the office was louder than the shouting that followed. "You talked like a lawyer," my father spat. He was pacing again, kicking at a box of inventory. "You made it worse. Why did you say you didn't sign it? You could have just said you were not sure. You could have been vague." "I didn't sign it." "Dad," I shouted back, "you know I didn't. I saw the folder. I saw the practice sheets. He stopped. The color drained from his face, then returned in a violent flush. You went through my desk? I was looking for the truth. I said, because you obviously weren't going to give it to me. My mother started crying. It was a weeping sound, low and mournful. We did it for you, she sobbed. We did it for the family. The business was going under. Bella, we needed the loans to keep the doors open. We couldn't get them with our credit. We used your name because you have good credit. We were going to pay it back. We just needed time. You committed fraud, I said, and you made me the face of it. It is only fraud if you admit it, my father yelled. If you had just stuck to the story, we could have fixed this. Derek had a plan to restate the earnings. Now you have given them ammunition. I grabbed my purse. I am leaving. I said, Bella, please, my mother cried, reaching for my arm. Do not walk away. We are a family. Families fix things. I pulled away from her touch. It felt like burning. I went home and turned off my phone. But I couldn't turn off the reality. I knew what was coming. I worked in compliance. I knew that once the state started digging, they wouldn't stop until they found a throat to step on. The ambush happened 2 days later. It was Sunday. My parents showed up at my apartment door. They had key privileges, another boundary I had failed to set. But they knocked. It was a polite, terrifying knock. When I opened the door, they walked in carrying bags of takeout from my favorite Chinese place. My mother was wearing her church clothes. My father was wearing a clean shirt. They looked like parents visiting their daughter for a casual dinner, but the energy was wrong. It was predatory. We need to talk. Bella, my father said. He set the food on my small dining table. Sit down. I sat. I didn't want the food. The smell of sesame oil made me nauseous. My mother sat across from me and took my hands. Her hands were cold. We have been talking to a lawyer, she said, a friend of Derek's. He says the situation is complicated. Complicated. I repeated, the state is looking for someone to blame. My father said, he was not eating either. He was staring at me with an intensity that made me want to shrink. They want a scalp. If they go after me and your mother, they will take everything. The house, the warehouse, the inventory. We will be destitute. Bella, your mother, she cannot handle prison. She has her heart condition. I looked at my mother. She dabbed at dry eyes with a tissue. So what are you saying? I asked. My father reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. He slid it across the table. We need you to take responsibility, he said. The words hung in the air, heavy, absolute. Excuse me? I whispered. Your name is already on the filings, he said. The loans, the tax documents. Derek set it up that way. If you say that you were managing the finances, that you made some bad calls, that you were trying to help the business grow, they will go easy on you. You have a clean record. You are young. You want me to confess to crimes I didn't commit? I asked. My voice sounded high and thin in my own ears. It is not a confession, my mother said quickly. It is taking one for the team. My father opened the envelope. He spread the documents out on the table. Pushing aside the cartons of rice, there was a sworn statement admitting to sole control of the financial decisions. There was a document labeled Bookkeeper Authorization, backdated 3 years, giving me full authority over the accounts, and there was a power of attorney. Why do you need a power of attorney? I asked, pointing to the bottom document. Just in case. My father said, if you have to go away for a little while, we need to be able to manage your affairs. Pay your rent. Keep your car. We need to protect your assets while you are gone. Gone, I said. You mean in prison? My father looked me in the eye. He didn't blink. 2 years. He said, the lawyer says with a plea deal, you will get 2 years, maybe less with good behavior. 2 years. I repeated, 2 years in prison won't kill you. Bella, he said. The sentence hit me like a physical slap. He said it so casually, as if 2 years of my life, my career, my freedom, was a small price to pay for his comfort. And if I don't? I asked. If you don't, my father said. his voice dropping to a growl. Then they come for us, and we lose the house. We lose the business. Your mother ends up on the street. Is that what you want? After everything we have done for you? We raised you. We fed you. We put you through college. You are asking me to destroy my life. I said, we are asking you to save ours. My mother screamed. She slammed her hand on the table. Why are you being so selfish? It is 2 years. You have your whole life ahead of you. We are old. We have nothing else. She started crying again, loud, heaving sobs. My father put his arm around her and looked at me with pure disgust. Look what you're doing to her, he said. Just sign the papers. Bella, be a daughter. I looked at the papers. The lines for the signatures were blank, waiting for me. I looked at the power of attorney. It gave them unrestricted access to my bank accounts, my retirement fund, my credit. I need to think about it. I said, you do not have time to think, my father shouted. The lawyer needs these tomorrow morning. I need to sleep on it. I said, I stood up. My legs felt like jelly. Leave the papers. Please, just leave. My father glared at me. He stood up and buttoned his jacket. We will be back at 8 in the morning, he said. Have them signed. Do not let us down. Bella, not this time. They left. The apartment was suddenly quiet, but the air still felt poisoned. I sat at the table and stared at the documents. 2 years in prison won't kill you. The words looped in my head. They were right. It wouldn't kill me, but it would kill Bella Morgan. The risk officer. It would kill Bella Morgan. The woman with a future. I picked up the power of attorney. If I signed this, I was handing them the keys to my life. If I didn't sign it, they would be destroyed. And despite everything, despite the forgery, the gaslighting, the cruelty, the guilt was a hook in my chest. They were my parents. I had been trained since birth to catch them when they fell. But something in me had fractured when he said that line, won't kill you. It was the calculation of it. They had weighed my life against their assets and decided I was the expendable currency I needed to sign. They gave me no choice. But I also knew, with the cold clarity of a compliance officer looking at a fraudulent ledger, that I could not trust them. I looked at the clock. It was 9:30 at night. I pulled out my phone. I searched for mobile notary, 24 hours. A name popped up, Marisol Klein. I dialed the number. This is Marisol. A woman's voice answered. She sounded tired but professional. Hi, I said. My name is Bella. I need a notary. Tonight. It is urgent. I can be there in an hour. She said. Where are you? No. I said, not here. Can we meet somewhere else? A coffee shop? Somewhere with lights? There is a diner on Route 9 that is open late. She said. The Starlight. I know it. I said. I gathered the papers. I grabbed a separate sheet of lined notebook paper and a pen. I am going to sign. I whispered to the empty room. But I'm not going to sign alone. I texted my parents. I will sign. Meeting you tomorrow. It was the first lie I told them in the new war. I grabbed my coat and walked out into the cool night air. I was going to prison. I knew that now. The trap had snapped shut. But as I walked to my car, I made a promise to the version of myself that was about to die. I would leave a trail. I would leave crumbs in the forest. And one day, if I survived, I would follow them back and find the wolves. I started the engine and drove toward the diner. The radio was off. The only sound was the tires on the pavement and the rhythmic beating of my own heart. Counting down the seconds of my freedom. The coffee shop near Pinebrook Plaza was neutral ground. That was why I chose it. It smelled of roasted beans and damp coats. A mundane setting for the dismantling of my life. My parents were already there when I arrived, sitting at a wobbly round table near the window. My father was tapping his foot, a rapid, nervous rhythm that vibrated through the floorboards. My mother was shredding a paper napkin into tiny, snowy piles. I had Marisol Klein, the mobile notary, waiting in her car. I had texted her when I pulled in. Come in 5 minutes after I sit down. I walked to the table. I did not hug them. I sat down and placed my hands flat on the surface. You are late, my father said. He checked his watch. The lawyer's expecting the scans by noon. I am on time. Dad, I said. My mother pushed a cup of black coffee toward me. It was cold. Did you bring the ID? She asked. And the checkbook? Yes, I said. The bell above the door jingled, and Marisol walked in. She was a short woman with sharp, observant eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She carried a large leather tote bag and wore an expression of practiced neutrality. I had spoken to her briefly on the phone the night before, just enough to confirm she could handle a complex packet with multiple signatories. I had not told her the whole story. I could not risk scaring her off, but I had told her I needed everything done by the book. Strictly by the book. She approached the table. Mr. and Mrs. Morgan? She asked. And Bella? That is us, my father said, standing up halfway to shake her hand before sitting back down abruptly. Let us get this done. We are in a hurry. Marisol set her bag down and pulled out her notary journal. It was a thick, bound book. She opened it to a fresh page and smoothed it down. I need to see identification for all signers, she said. Driver's licenses, please, my father huffed, digging for his wallet. This is just a formality. We are family. State law requires it. Sir, Marisol said. Her voice was calm, immovable. We handed over our IDs. She examined them, looking from the plastic cards to our faces and back again. She logged the numbers, the expiration dates, and the issuance times in her journal. She wrote slowly. Can you speed it up? My father snapped. Marisol paused and looked at him over her glasses. I cannot, she said. If I rush, I make mistakes. If I make mistakes, the documents are invalid. Do you want invalid documents? My father clenched his jaw and looked away. Marisol turned to me. She placed the stack of papers my parents had prepared in front of me. The confession, the retroactive authorization, the power of attorney. Do you understand what you are signing? Bella? She asked. I looked at my parents. My mother was holding her breath. My father was glaring at the table. Yes, I said. I understand. I picked up the pen. My hand was steady. Which surprised me. I signed the confession first. I, Bella Morgan, assume full responsibility. The ink flowed smoothly. I was signing away my reputation, my career, my future. When I got to the power of attorney, I paused. I read the clause about asset liquidation. Why does this say you can sell my car without my consent? I asked. My father leaned in. It is standard language. Bella, if you are away, we might need to sell it to pay your legal fees. We are trying to help you. Stop reading like you are smarter than us. I am reading because it is my life. I said, just sign it, he hissed. People were starting to look. A woman at the next table glanced over, sensing the violence in his whisper. I signed it. Then, I reached into my own bag. I have one more document, I said. I pulled out the statement I had typed up the night before. It was simple. It stated that I was signing the previous documents under duress, that the financial crimes had been committed prior to my involvement, and that I was accepting the plea solely to protect my elderly parents from prosecution. It detailed the conversation at the kitchen table. It named Derek Voss. What is that? My mother asked, her voice shrill. It is for my records, I said. I slid it to Marisol. I need this notarized as well. I said, it is a personal affidavit. My father snatched at the paper. But Marisol was faster. She placed her hand over it. The signer has requested a notarization. She said, you do not need that. My father said to me, his face was turning a mottled purple, we have everything we need. This is just drama. You are creating drama. I am creating a record. I said, if you want me to sign your papers, you let me sign mine. That is the deal. He looked at me, and he saw something he didn't recognize. He saw the wall I had built overnight. He realized that if he pushed too hard, right here in this coffee shop, I might walk away. And if I walked away, he went to prison. Fine, he spat. Whatever makes you feel better. Marisol took the affidavit. She logged it in her journal. Affidavit of circumstances. She wrote, She noted the time. She noted that my parents were present. She noted my demeanor. Lucid, firm. I signed it. She stamped it. The heavy thunk-clunk of the embosser felt like a gavel hitting a block. I have one more request, I said to Marisol. I pulled a pre-addressed envelope from my bag. It was addressed to a P.O. box in Northbridge City, a box I had opened online at 3 a.m. I would like you to mail this copy directly. Do not give it to me. Do not give it to them. That is highly irregular, my father said. It is a service I provide. Marisol said. She took the envelope and the copy of the affidavit. She sealed it in front of us. Thank you, I said. My parents gathered their stack of papers. They stood up immediately. They did not wait for me. They did not offer to pay for the notary. My father threw a $20 bill on the table for the coffee, though we hadn't drunk it, and they walked out. I stayed. I paid Marisol her fee plus a generous tip. You going to be okay? She asked me as she packed up her stamp. No, I said, but thank you. She looked at me for a long moment, then tapped her journal. I keep good records, she said. I never lose a book. I watched her leave. I sat there for another 10 minutes, watching the cars pass on the busy street outside, knowing I had just bought myself a ticket to hell. But I had packed a parachute. The public defender's office was a study in chaos. Files were stacked in teetering towers on every surface. The air smelled of stale toner and despair. My attorney, a man named Mr. Henderson, who looked like he hadn't slept in a week, rubbed his temples as he looked at the file on his desk. He did not know about the affidavit. I had decided to keep that card hidden. If I used it now, the deal would blow up, and my parents would be charged. I had to play the part I had written for myself. It does not look good. Bella, he said. He turned his monitor so I could see. The prosecutor has emails. He said, hundreds of them, sent from an address, bmorgan.finance@gmail.com. They authorize transfers. They discuss hiding assets. They explicitly mention cooking the books to secure loans. I stared at the screen. I had never created that email address. I didn't write these. I said, the IP addresses trace back to the Wi-Fi at Northline Supply. He said, where you worked, where you admit to helping out. He pulled out another sheet, and we have the bank opening documents. Your signature is on the signature card for the account that received the diverted funds. It was the forgery, the one from the folder. It is a forgery. I said, Bella, he said, his voice gentle but exhausted. Everyone says it is a forgery. But to prove that, we need a handwriting expert. We need a trial. And if we go to trial, and the jury sees these emails, and they hear your parents testify, because the prosecutor will subpoena them, and they say you were in charge, you are looking at 10 to 15 years. 10 to 15 years. The number hung in the room. The prosecutor is offering a deal, Henderson said, because you have no priors, because you are cooperating. 2 years. Restitution. 2 years. My father's voice echoed in my head. 2 years in prison won't kill you. This is paper truth. I said, it is not what happened. In this building, he said, gesturing to the courthouse around us. Paper truth beats actual truth 9 times out of 10. The paper says you are guilty. I looked at the emails again. They were written in a style that mimicked mine. Concise, professional. Derek Voss had studied me. He had constructed a digital golem of me and set it loose to commit crimes while I was sitting at my desk doing risk assessments. I tried to fight it one last time, not with the lawyer, but with the architects. I went to my parents' house that night. The for sale sign was not in the yard. The business was still open. They were safe. I walked into the living room. They were watching television, a game show. The normalcy of it made me want to scream. We can sell the inventory, I said. I stood in front of the TV. We can liquidate the old machinery. We can report Derek to the ethics board. If we go to the prosecutor together and tell them Derek set this up, maybe we can all get out of this. My father muted the TV. He did not look at me. He looked at the blank screen. We have been over this, he said. It is not right, I yelled. I was done being the quiet fixer. I am going to prison for things I didn't do. You are doing it for the family, my mother shouted back. She stood up, her face flushed. Why can't you understand that? Loyalty means sacrifice. Bella, we sacrificed everything for you. We paid for your college. We bought you your first car. Now we need you. And you are whining about it. Whining? I asked. I am talking about becoming a felon. If you back out now, my father said, standing up to join her, if you try to pin this on us or Derek, I will disown you. I mean it. You will not be our daughter. You will be the stranger who destroyed her parents in their old age, and no one will believe you anyway. The papers are signed. I looked at them. I really looked at them. I saw the fear. Yes, but I also saw the entitlement. They truly believed that my life was theirs to spend. I realized then that there was no alternative. Not because of the evidence, but because they would never let me go. I was the escape hatch. Fine, I said. I will take the plea. Good, my father said. He sat back down and unmuted the TV. That is the right choice. I walked out of the house. I didn't say goodbye. I knew I wouldn't be coming back to this house as a daughter. I would come back as something else entirely. The sentencing hearing was a blur. I stood before the judge in a gray suit that felt like a costume. My parents were in the gallery, sitting in the front row, holding hands. They looked like the grieving victims of a wayward child. The judge was an older man with a face carved from stone. He looked at me with disappointment. Ms. Morgan, he said, you had every advantage, a good education, a stable career, and yet you chose to defraud lenders and the state for personal gain. It is a tragedy of greed. I wanted to scream. I wanted to point to the back of the room and yell that the greed was sitting right there in a polyester blouse, but I had signed the papers. I had made the deal. I sentence you to 24 months in the state correctional facility. The judge said. He paused, looking at a document on his bench, and regarding restitution, he continued. Based on the amended filings submitted by the victims, Northline Supply, the total amount of misappropriated funds is calculated at $450,000. You are ordered to repay this amount in full. $450,000. My knees buckled. The original number discussed had been 50,000, maybe 100. I looked back at my parents. My father was nodding solemnly. They had inflated the loss. They had dumped every bad debt, every loss from their own incompetence. Onto my tab, they were using my conviction to wipe their entire slate clean. I was taken into custody immediately. The bailiff moved behind me. I heard the click of the handcuffs. It was a cold, mechanical sound. I didn't look at my parents as I was led away. I looked straight ahead. At the exit sign. Prison smelled of bleach and unwashed bodies. It was a sensory assault. The lights were always on. The noise was constant. Shouting, slamming doors, the squawk of radios. I was processed like cattle, strip-searched, squat and cough, shower with soap that smelled like lye. Given a uniform that was 2 sizes too big. My cell was a concrete box with a bunk bed and a stainless steel toilet. I was assigned the top bunk. I lay there on the thin mattress, staring at the graffiti scratched into the ceiling. God was here, but he left early. For the first 2 weeks, I was catatonic. I moved through the routine. Count, chow, yard, count, chow, sleep, like a ghost. I was consumed by a shame so thick it felt like oil in my lungs. I kept replaying the scene at the kitchen table. 2 years in prison won't kill you. I tried to decode it. Did they love me? Did they ever love me? Or was I always just an insurance policy to them? A resource to be harvested when the winter came? I cried at night, silently, biting into my pillow so the guards wouldn't hear. Then I met Tanya. Tanya Greer was 50 years old, with gray hair pulled back in a tight braid and eyes that missed nothing. She was in the library, shelving books. I had started going to the library because it was the only place that was quiet. You are going to wear a hole in that table, she said to me one afternoon. I was staring at a legal dictionary, not reading it. What? I asked. You are staring, she said. And and you are crying without tears. It is annoying. I am sorry. I said, "Stop being sorry," she said. She sat down opposite me. "You are the new one, the white-collar girl. Mommy and daddy issues, right?" "How did you know?" I asked. "We all have issues," she said, "but the ones who look like they have been kicked by a mule usually got screwed by family. Listen to me. Crying won't fix it. Anger won't fix it. What will fix it?" I asked. "Paper," she said. She tapped the table with a long fingernail. "The system runs on paper," she said. "It eats paper. It breathes paper. If you want to survive in here, and if you want to kill them when you get out, you need to learn how to write." "Write what?" I asked. "Everything," she said. She taught me the method. She gave me a composition notebook she had acquired from the supply closet. "Write down every interaction," she said. "Dates, times, names. Do not write, 'The guard was mean.' Write, 'Officer Miller denied recreation time at 1400 hours, citing no reason.' Do not write, 'My parents are liars.' Write, 'Received letter from mother dated January 12th. Letter claims restitution payments are being handled. No receipt enclosed.' Strip the emotion out of it." She told me, "Emotion makes you look crazy. Facts make you look dangerous." I started writing. At first it was hard. The anger wanted to bleed onto the page. I wanted to use exclamation points and underlined words. But Tanya would check my work. "Too much drama." She would say, scratching out a paragraph, "This is a diary entry. I want an evidence log." I practiced. I learned to distill my rage into cold, hard data. A month later, I saw a flyer on the bulletin board in the common room. Paralegal Certification Program. Open to inmates with high school diploma or equivalent. I signed up. The classes were taught by a retired civil rights attorney who volunteered his time. We learned about torts, contracts, criminal procedure. Most of the other women were there to pass the time or try to fight their own appeals. I was there to build an arsenal. I discovered I had a talent for it. My background in compliance, which I had thought was useless here, was actually a superpower. I knew how to read the fine print. I knew how to follow the money. I knew that the truth was never in the bold text. It was in the footnotes. I started building timelines. I requested my own case file, the public records that I was allowed to see. I laid them out on my bunk. I matched dates to emails. I found the gaps. I saw where Derek Voss had been sloppy. I saw where the dates on the invoices didn't match the shipping logs. I saw the inconsistencies in the victim impact statement my father had submitted. I wasn't just a prisoner anymore. I was an auditor, and I was auditing the crime of my own life. One afternoon, 6 months into my sentence, Tanya looked at my notebook. I had created a matrix of the fraudulent transfers, cross-referenced with my parents' visiting schedule, which was non-existent, and their letters. "You are getting good at this," she said. I looked up at her. My eyes were dry. My hands were steady. "I am not just getting good," I said. "I am getting ready. 2 years wouldn't kill me." But the Bella they knew was already dead. The woman sitting in the prison library was something new. Something they had created, forged in the fire of their betrayal and stamped by the state. And she was keeping receipts. The letters from home were a masterclass in gaslighting. They arrived on pastel stationery, the kind my mother used to write thank you notes for bridal showers. They smelled faintly of lavender, a scent that now made my stomach turn. "Dearest Bella," she wrote in her looping cursive, "we hope you are finding peace. The business is turning a corner. Praise God. We are working so hard to fix the mess. Dad is tired but pushing through. We are handling the restitution payments, so do not worry your pretty head about money. Just focus on getting better, as if I were in a sanitarium for a nervous breakdown, not a state penitentiary for felony fraud." I sat on my bunk, the letter open in my lap. Tanya was on the bottom bunk, reading a paperback thriller. "Let me guess," she said without looking up. "They are praying for you? They are handling the restitution." I said, "But they didn't send a receipt." "They never send a receipt. Of course not." Tanya said, "If they send a receipt, you have proof. If they just say it, you have hope. Hope is cheaper. I folded the letter and placed it in my file box. It was a cardboard accordion file I had bought from the commissary. It was my most precious possession. Inside, organized by date, was every scrap of communication I had received. The inconsistencies were subtle at first. In March, my father wrote that they had sold the old delivery truck to pay down the debt. In April, my mother mentioned in a PS that the delivery truck had broken down and cost a fortune to fix. In May, they said they were refinancing the house to help me. In June, they talked about how the market was too bad to refinance. They were lies, but they were sloppy lies. They were the lies of people who thought their audience was captive and helpless. They forgot that I had nothing to do but read, reread, and remember. Then the silence started. I had a calling card with a limited number of minutes. Every Sunday at 2 o'clock. I called home. It was a ritual of pain I felt obligated to perform. On the first Sunday in August, no one answered. The line rang and rang until the automated voice cut in. I tried again the next week. Nothing. I tried the warehouse number. Voicemail. 3 weeks of silence. When I finally got a letter, it was short and typed. Sorry we missed your calls. Phone lines were down due to a storm. Dealing with the phone company is a nightmare. Will write soon. Love, Mom, a storm. I checked the weather reports in the library newspapers. Cedar Hollow had been sunny and 70 degrees for 3 weeks. The real news came from my cousin, Sarah. She was the only family member who still spoke to me, mostly because she was the black sheep of the family herself. A bartender with a nose ring and a history of dating musicians my parents hated. She visited on a Saturday. We sat across from each other at the metal table, separated by the plexiglass divider. They are telling people you stole from them. Bella, she said. Her voice was low, conspiratorial. I leaned in. Who? Everyone, she said. At church, at the grocery store. Aunt Elaine was crying at the potluck last week. She said you embezzled nearly $500,000 to fund a gambling addiction. Gambling? I whispered. I have never bought a lottery ticket in my life. Sarah shrugged. It is a good story. It explains where the money went. And it makes them look like saints for standing by you. They say they are paying back your debts out of love. People are bringing them casseroles. Bella, they are the victims. I felt a cold rage settle in my chest. It wasn't the heat of anger anymore. It was the chill of clarity. They weren't just protecting themselves. They were actively destroying my name to build their own pedestal. I need you to do something for me. I said to Sarah, What? I need you to drive by the house. Tell me if there are new cars. Tell me if they are renovating. She nodded. I can do that. And Sarah? Do not tell them you came here. She smiled, a sharp, cynical smile. Honey, I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. The next week, I requested a meeting with my case manager regarding my restitution status. I had been logging my work hours, cents per hour for cleaning the cell block, and I wanted to know how much was being deducted. The case manager, a tired woman named Ms. Alvarez, pulled up my file on her computer. Okay, Morgan, she said, you are paying 20% of your commissary deposits and wages. Current balance owing is $475,000. Wait, I said. I froze. It was $450 at sentencing. She squinted at the screen. Looks like an amendment was filed last month. Additional losses discovered. Interest and penalties. Can I see the filing? I asked. She sighed. You have to put in a request form. I put in the request form. I filled it out in triplicate. I used the exact language Tanya had taught me, pursuant to my rights as the defendant, requesting full disclosure of updated victim impact statements. When the documents arrived 2 weeks later, I took them to my bunk and spread them out. There was a new affidavit from Northline Supply. It claimed that further audits had revealed hidden accounts that I had drained before my incarceration. It was signed by my father, but there was something else. Attached to the filing was a copy of a bank transfer authorization dated 2 months after I was locked up. It had my signature on it. I stared at the loop of the B. It was the forgery. The same one. They were still doing it. They were using my name to move money, probably to hide assets from their own creditors or the IRS, and they were pinning the transaction on me. They were using my incarcerated status as the perfect cover. Who would question the finances of a convicted fraudster? Tanya looked over my shoulder. "That is bold," she said. "Stupid, but bold. They think I can't see it." I said, "They think I'm in a black hole." "You are?" she said. "But even black holes have event horizons. You need to verify this." I wrote to Marisol Klein. It was a risk. She might have moved. She might have thrown away her journals. She might not want to get involved with a felon. My letter was professional. I didn't beg. "Dear Ms. Klein," I wrote, "I hope this letter finds you well. I am writing to request confirmation of the transaction we conducted on November 12th, 2 years ago, at the coffee shop near Pinebrook Plaza. Specifically, I am inquiring if you retain the records of the second document notarized that evening, the personal affidavit, and the mailing receipt for the copy sent to the PO box. A simple confirmation of their existence in your logs would be appreciated." I waited. The prison mail system was slow, every day. During mail call, I stood with my hands clasped behind my back, waiting for my name. "Morgan!" The guard barked 3 weeks later. He handed me a stiff envelope. It had a professional return address label, Klein Mobile Notary Services. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper on letterhead. "Dear Miss Morgan, per your request, I have reviewed my notary journal for the date in question. I confirm that I hold the original journal entry, 11,405, detailing the notarization of a personal statement of circumstances signed by you. My log notes indicate the presence of 2 witnesses, your parents, and your specific instruction to mail a certified copy to a PNO's box, for which I retain the USPS tracking receipt 9405. I keep all records for 10 years as required by state law. They are safe. Sincerely, Marisol Klein. I let out a breath I had been holding for a year. They are safe. It was a small thing, a log entry, a receipt number. But in a world of gaslighting and shifting paper trails, it was a rock. It proved that on the night the trap snapped shut, I had told the truth. I showed it to Tanya. She nodded slowly. "That is your ace," she said. "Do not play it yet." "I won't." I said. The hits kept coming. A week later, my cellmate, a young woman named Kira, who was in for credit card fraud, was crying on her bunk. "What is it?" I asked. "My boyfriend." She sobbed. "He opened 3 credit cards in my name. He maxed them out. He says he needed the money for my appeal. But his Instagram shows him in Miami. That is awful." I said, "It is the inmate special," she said, wiping her nose. "They know we can't check our credit. They know we can't freeze our reports. By the time we get out, our scores are 0 and we owe thousands." I felt a cold prickle on the back of my neck. I had assumed my parents were just adding to the restitution tab. But if they were forging my signature on bank transfers, I went to the library. I filled out a request form for a consumer credit report. Inmates were allowed 1 per year to prepare for re-entry. It took a month. When the report came, I sat in the corner of the library, away from everyone. I opened it. My credit score, once a pristine 780, was now in the low 500s. But it wasn't just the judgment. There were 3 new inquiries in the last 6 months. There was a new credit card opened with a bank I had never used. Balance, $12,000. Status, past due. There was a car loan, a $30,000 loan for a Ford F-150, taken out 4 months ago. I was in prison. I could not drive a car. I could not sign a loan document in a dealership. They had bought a truck, probably the one to replace the delivery truck they sold, and they had bought it in my name. I felt sick, physically sick. I ran to the bathroom and dry-heaved into the toilet. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was cannibalism. They were eating my identity, piece by piece, while I sat in a cage they had built for me. I went back to the cell. I didn't cry. I pulled out my notebook. I logged the credit card. I logged the car loan. I logged the dates. Then I wrote a letter to the credit bureaus. Not to dispute it yet. I couldn't risk alerting my parents. I just requested a fraud alert be placed on my file, stating that I was incarcerated and any new applications should be flagged. It was a small move, but it was a start. 2 weeks later, the phone rang. It was my father. "Bella?" he said. His voice was tight, rushed. "We haven't heard from you. I have been calling." I said, my voice was flat. Calm as power. "Oh, the phones," he said. "Listen, honey, we have a small situation. The lawyer needs one more form signed. It is just a formality, some housekeeping for the restitution account. We are going to mail it to you. You need to sign it and send it back immediately." "What is it for?" I asked. "It is just a waiver," he said, "to allow us to consolidate some of the debts, to help pay them off faster." Consolidate debts. That meant moving the credit card debt they had racked up onto the restitution pile, or maybe refinancing the house in my name. "I am not signing anything." "Dad," I said. There was a pause, a long, heavy silence. "What did you say?" I said no. I repeated, "I am not signing any more documents, not without reading them, not without my own lawyer." "Bella," he said, his voice dropping to that dangerous growl I remembered from the kitchen table. "Do not play games. We are doing this for you. We are paying your debts. You are paying debts you created in my name." I said, "I saw the credit report. I saw the truck." "Dad." He didn't deny it. He didn't gasp. He pivoted. "We needed the truck for the business, to pay the restitution. How do you think we make money?" "Bella, by sitting around? We are working ourselves to death out here while you sit in there and get fed 3 meals a day. I am in prison." I said, "And whose fault is that?" He snapped. "You signed the plea. You admitted it. Because you made me." I said, "You are ungrateful." He said, "You are a selfish, ungrateful child. If you do not sign that paper, Bella, do not expect any money on your books. Do not expect any visits. Do not expect to come home to a room. I don't want your money." I said, "And I don't have a room." I hung up. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from adrenaline. I had severed the line. I was drifting in open space now. The next week, my commissary account was empty. They had stopped the deposits. I didn't care. I scrubbed floors. I took extra shifts in the laundry. I ate the bland prison loaf. I would not take a cent from them. Every dollar they gave me was a hook, and I was done swallowing hooks. The last 6 months of my sentence were a grind. I kept my head down. I worked on my timeline. I helped other inmates with their paperwork. I became the jailhouse lawyer of Cell Block C. I learned to speak the language of the bureaucracy. I learned that "I feel" is a weak phrase, but "the record shows" is a shield. I learned that silence is often more effective than shouting. I watched the seasons change through the narrow slit of a window. Snow, rain, sun, leaves. I was rebuilding myself, not as the daughter they wanted, but as the witness they feared. I gathered allies. Tanya, who taught me to see the game. Kira, who taught me how identity theft worked. A friendly guard who looked the other way when I spent too long in the law library. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger is hot and burns out. I was cold. I was a glacier, moving slow and grinding everything in my path to dust. 2 weeks before my release, I was called to the counselor's office. There was a new man there, a restitution officer from the state. He looked bored, flipping through a thick file. "Ms. Morgan," he said, "we are preparing for your transition to supervised release." "Okay," I said. "I see here that your family has submitted updated asset information." He said, "They filed a financial disclosure on your behalf last week." My heart skipped a beat. "Last week? On my behalf?" I asked. "Yes," he said, "listing your assets to secure the payment schedule. It says here, you have a controlling interest in a consulting firm? Hearthstone Consulting?" Hearthstone Consulting. The name I had seen on the bank transfers years ago. The shell company. "I do not own a consulting firm." I said. He looked up, annoyed. "It is in the file. Ms. Morgan, signed by your power of attorney. It lists you as the primary beneficiary." I stared at him. They were doing it again. They were setting me up for the next fall. They were moving their dirty company into my name before I even walked out the gate. If Hearthstone was investigated, I would be the owner. I would go back to prison. I took a deep breath. "Can I get a copy of that disclosure?" I asked. He shrugged. "It is in your file. You can request it." I walked back to my cell. My blood was ice. They weren't just using me. They were burying me. They intended to keep me as their permanent scapegoat. As long as I was the criminal, they were the saints. I sat on my bunk. Tanya was packing her things. She was getting out 2 days before me. "What is it?" she asked. "They put a shell company in my name." I said, "They are waiting for me to get out so they can pin the next crime on me." She stopped packing. She looked at me with hard, dark eyes. "Then you know what you have to do," she said. "Yes," I said. "You can't just survive this." "Bella," she said, "you have to end it." I opened my accordion file. I looked at the notary letter. I looked at the credit report. I looked at the timeline. "I am going to end it." I said. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to fight at the dinner table. I was going to let them think they had won. I was going to let them think I was broken, desperate, and compliant. I was going to let them hand me the shovel. And then I was going to bury them with it. I closed the file. The snap of the elastic band sounded like a gunshot in the quiet cell. The bus ride from the correctional facility to Cedar Hollow took 4 hours. I watched the world scroll by. Strip malls, cornfields, billboards for personal injury lawyers, and felt like an astronaut returning to a planet that had moved on without her. I was wearing the clothes I had been arrested in. A gray cardigan that smelled of mothballs and slacks that were now loose around my waist. I had $40 in cash, a bus ticket, and my accordion file. I expected my parents to be at the station. I had pictured the scene 1,000 times in my cell. My mother would be crying, holding a bouquet of supermarket carnations. My father would be standing awkwardly, checking his watch, eager to get the unpleasantness over with. I had rehearsed my lines, polite, distant, compliant. But when the bus hissed to a stop at the Cedar Hollow depot, the platform was empty. I stood there for 20 minutes, clutching my file, while other passengers were embraced by families. I checked my watch. I checked the payphone. I dialed the home number I had known since childhood. "We're sorry. The number you have reached is no longer in service." My stomach dropped. I tried the warehouse. Voicemail. Finally. I called my cousin Sarah. She answered on the second ring. "Bella? Oh my God. You are out?" "I am at the station." I said, "Where are they?" There was a pause, a long, guilty silence. They moved. "Bella, 2 months ago, they sold the house." "Sold the house?" "But they said—" "I know what they said." Sarah interrupted. "They moved to a condo in Northbridge, a gated community. They changed their numbers." "Why didn't they tell me?" I asked. Though I knew the answer, she sighed. "Look, Aunt Elaine dropped an envelope off at my place last week. She said to give it to you if you called. It has a key in it." I waited at the station until Sarah pulled up in her beat-up Honda. She hugged me hard, smelling of cigarettes and expensive perfume. She handed me a white envelope with my name scrawled on it in my mother's handwriting. Inside was a single silver key and a note on a sticky pad. 14B River Road. Rent paid for October. Get settled. We will call when we are ready. Love, Mom. When we are ready. Sarah drove me to River Road. It was a rundown complex near the old textile mill, the kind of place where people stayed by the week. The apartment was a studio with peeling linoleum and a smell of damp drywall. There was a futon, a card table, and a mini-fridge. "This is it?" Sarah asked, looking around with distaste. "They sold a 4-bedroom house and put you here?" "It is fine," I said. "It is quiet." I didn't tell her that quiet was all I could afford. I checked my bank balance on my phone, using the browser because my app login had expired. I expected to see the $5,000 I had in savings before I went in. Balance, $12.43. I stared at the screen. I scrolled through the transaction history. Withdrawal, legal fees. Withdrawal, personal maintenance, transfer to N. Supply operating account. They had drained it, every cent. Using the power of attorney, I had signed in the coffee shop. They hadn't just used me as a shield. They had looted the corpse. I sat on the futon. I didn't cry. I had done all my crying in cell block C. I felt a cold, metallic resolve harden in my chest. Can you take me to the bank tomorrow? I asked Sarah. And the DMV? She looked at me, worried. You going to be okay here tonight? I looked at the door. It had a deadbolt. I will be fine, I said. I am used to smaller rooms than this. The next few days were a crash course in the reality of re-entry. I was a felon. That word was a brand on my forehead. I went to the bank. The teller, a woman I had gone to high school with, looked at me with a mix of pity and suspicion when I asked for my statements. Your parents handled everything. Bella, she said, sliding the papers under the glass. They said it was for the lawyers. There were no receipts for lawyers. Just transfers to Northline Supply and cash withdrawals. They had treated my life savings like a petty cash drawer. I pulled my credit report again. This time on a library computer. The damage had grown since I last checked in prison. The car loan for the Ford F-150 was there, but now there were credit cards opened in the last 3 months. And a new entry, Hearthstone Consulting LLC, a business line of credit for $50,000, personally guaranteed by Bella Morgan. I had never heard of Hearthstone Consulting until the restitution officer mentioned it. Now I saw it was registered to a P.O. box in Northbridge, the same town my parents had moved to. They were building a new business, using my credit. While I slept on a futon in a damp apartment, I realized then that my conviction was their greatest asset. Who would believe a convicted fraudster who claimed her identity was being stolen? I was the type now. Scammers scam, liars lie. If I complained, it would look like I was trying to dodge my restitution. I needed proof that predated the conviction. I borrowed Sarah's car and drove to the address I had for Marisol Klein. Marisol was still there. Her office was a small room in the back of a copy shop, cluttered with files and smelling of toner. When I walked in, she looked up, adjusting her glasses. Bella Morgan, she said, I wondered when I'd see you. You kept the records? I asked. She stood up and walked to a fireproof safe in the corner. She spun the dial. I told you, she said. I never lose a book. She pulled out the journal from 2 years ago. She opened it to the page. November 12th. There it was. My signature. My parents' signatures as witnesses. And the entry for the affidavit of circumstances. I also kept this, she said. She pulled a folder from the back of the safe. Inside were photocopies of the IDs we had presented that night. And a photocopy of the mailing label she had put on the envelope, sent to my secret P.O. box. Why? I asked. Why did you keep the copies? Notaries usually just keep the log. She looked at me, her face serious. Because your father tried to come back the next day. She said. My blood ran cold. He came back? He wanted me to void the second entry. She said, he said it was a mistake. He said you were emotional and confused and that I shouldn't have notarized a personal statement. He offered me $500 to strike it from the record. I stared at her. What did you do? I told him that altering a notary journal is a felony. She said, and that if he didn't leave my office, I would call the Secretary of State. She handed me the copies. He was steering the whole thing. Bella, I wrote that in my personal notes. Father aggressive, signer hesitant but compliant under pressure. It is all here. I took the papers. They felt heavy, like a weapon. Thank you, I said. She nodded. Go get them. My parole officer was named Raina Holt. She was a woman who looked like she could bench press a Buick. Her office was sparse, decorated only with a calendar and a framed quote that said, "Excuses are the nails used to build a house of failure." She reviewed my file without looking at me. Okay, Morgan, she said. Standard terms, no drugs, no alcohol, no contact with known felons. You maintain employment. You pay your restitution. You stay within the county lines unless you get a pass. I understand. I said, and no drama, she added, looking up. Her eyes were sharp. I know your case. Family fraud. Messy. I do not want to hear about you showing up at your parents' house screaming. I do not want to hear about threats. If you harass them, I will violate you. You go back inside. Do we understand each other? I am not going to harass them. I said, I just want to work and pay my debt. Good, she said. I have a lead on a job. Packaging plant out on Route 9. It is minimum wage. Night shift. They hire felons. I took the job. It was grueling work. Standing on a concrete floor for 10 hours. Packing boxes of auto parts. The noise was deafening. My hands bled for the first week until calluses formed, but the rhythm of the line gave me time to think. Box, tape, label, stack, box, tape, label, stack. I was building a structure in my mind, a cage, during the day. I slept for 4 hours. Then I worked on my case. I found a legal aid clinic in Northbridge City. It was in the basement of a church, staffed by law students and retired attorneys. I got an appointment with a young lawyer named Caleb Nguyen. He looked younger than me, with messy hair and a tie that was too short. He listened to my story. He looked at the notary log. He looked at the credit report. This is a lot, he said. Can we sue them? I asked. He leaned back, rubbing his chin. Coercion is hard to prove, he said. They will say you signed the power of attorney willingly. The notary log helps, but it is not a smoking gun for the original fraud. You already pleaded guilty to that. The court has decided you did it. Undoing a conviction is like trying to unring a bell. My heart sank. However, he said, leaning forward, the new stuff? The credit cards opened while you were in prison? The car loan? The Hearthstone consulting business? That is fresh fraud. That is identity theft. And if they use the power of attorney to benefit themselves, like draining your savings to pay their own bills, that is a breach of fiduciary duty. So we can get them on the new stuff? We can try, he said. But we need to connect the dots. We need to prove it was them and not some random hacker. And we need to prove the money from Hearthstone is going to them. I can do that. I said, how? I know how they think. I said, and I know who does their books. I started building the timeline board on the wall of my apartment. I used the back of old pizza boxes and taped them up. November 2019. The plea. December 2019. Power of attorney activated. January 2020. Bank account drained. June 2020. Ford. F-150. Purchased. Signature mismatch. August 2020. Hearthstone. Consulting registered. I pinned the notary log to the beginning. I pinned the credit report to the end. I needed the middle. I met my cousin Sarah for coffee on a Sunday. She looked nervous. What is it? I asked. I saw them, she said, at a restaurant in Northbridge. A nice one. The kind with cloth napkins. Who were they with? Derek Voss, she said. The accountant? And some other guys in suits. They were celebrating something. Champagne and everything. Derek Voss. He was the key. He was the one who set up the original fraud. He was the one who created the paper truth that convicted me. Did they say anything? I didn't go near them. She said, but Bella, I heard something else. From my mom. What? She said they had a dinner. Right after you were sentenced. A family support dinner. They invited the pastor, the suppliers, everyone. They stood up and cried. They said you had been troubled for years. A gambling problem. They said they were heartbroken, but they had to respect the law. They asked for prayers and patience with the business while they cleaned up your mess. I felt the air leave the room. They used my sentencing as a PR event. They used it to save the business. Sarah said, everyone felt sorry for them. The suppliers extended their credit. The bank gave them a grace period. Your convictions saved Northline Supply. I stared at my coffee. It wasn't just that they sacrificed me. It was that they marketed the sacrifice. They had turned my destruction into a rebranding campaign. That night, I went back to my apartment and stared at the board. Gambling problem. That was the narrative. I logged into my old email account. The one I had used before the B. Morgan Finance fake one was created. I hadn't checked it in 2 years. It was full of spam and "we miss you" emails from retailers. I went to the settings. I wanted to see if I could find any old correspondence with Derek Voss. I clicked on forwarding and POP/IMAP. My breath hitched. There was a forwarding rule. Forward a copy of incoming mail to devoss@gmail.com. Created September 12, 2019. September, 2 months before the investigation started, 2 months before I even knew there was a problem. Derek Voss had access to my personal email. He had been watching me. I looked closer. The rule didn't just forward mail. It had a filter. Subject contains bank, transfer, alert, and then mark as read, move to trash. He wasn't just watching, he was intercepting. If the bank had sent me alerts about the suspicious activity, Derek's rule would have forwarded them to him and deleted them from my inbox before I ever saw them. I hadn't been negligent. I had been blinded. I took a screenshot. I printed it out. I taped it to the board. This wasn't just a family tragedy. This was a conspiracy. Derek Voss and my parents had engineered a scapegoat. They needed someone with a clean record and access to the books, someone they could control. I looked at the Hearthstone Consulting note on my timeline. If Derek was involved, Hearthstone wasn't just a shell company, it was a laundering machine. I called Caleb Nguyen the next morning. "I have something." I said, "What?" Proof that the accountant had a backdoor into my email before the charges were ever filed. I said, "And proof that he was suppressing bank alerts." "That is interesting." Caleb said, "That suggests premeditation." "And Caleb?" I said, "Yeah? I need to know who owns Hearthstone Consulting, not just the name on the paper. I need the bank records. We can't get bank records without a subpoena." He said, "And we can't get a subpoena without a lawsuit, and we can't file a lawsuit without probable cause." I finished. Exactly. I looked at the notary log on my wall. I looked at the credit report. I have probable cause. I said, "Identity theft. They opened a business in my name without my consent. That is a crime." "It is," Caleb said. "But if we file, they will know you are coming for them. Let them know." I said, "I want them to know." I hung up. I went to work at the packaging plant. I stood on the line, box, tape, label, stack, but in my head, I was writing the complaint. Plaintiff, Bella Morgan. Defendants, George Morgan, Elaine Morgan, Derek Voss. I wasn't the fixer anymore. I was the wrecking ball. The next day, I received a letter. It was forwarded from my old address. It was a collections notice for the Ford F-150. Past due, repossession imminent. I smiled. Let them repossess it. Let them tow it from my parents' driveway in their gated community. Let the neighbors see. I took the notice and pinned it to the board. Phase 1, I whispered. Exposure. I sat back on my futon and watched the dust motes dance in the shaft of light from the window. I had no money. I had a criminal record. I had a family that had cannibalized me, but I had the truth. And for the first time in 2 years, the truth wasn't just paper, it was a weapon, and I was learning how to aim it. The basement of the legal aid clinic smelled of damp concrete and old coffee. It was a smell I had grown used to, a scent that somehow signaled safety. Caleb Nguyen sat hunched over his laptop, his tie loosened, the blue light of the screen reflecting in his glasses. I was sitting on a metal folding chair, my timeline board propped up against a stack of law textbooks. We had been digging for 3 weeks. We had requested every public record available on Northline Supply, using my mother's maiden name, my father's middle name, and every variation of the business address we could think of. "Look at this," Caleb said. His voice was quiet. I rolled my chair over. He was looking at a corporate filing from the Secretary of State's archive. It was a certificate of asset transfer. "What am I looking at?" I asked. "Look at the date," he said. I leaned in. October 14th, 2019. That was 3 weeks before the state investigators showed up at the warehouse. That was a month before the kitchen table ambush where my parents cried and begged me to save the family home. They transferred the assets. Caleb said, They moved the inventory, the client list, and the fleet titles from Northline Supply Incorporated to a new entity called NLS Logistics. He clicked another tab. "And look who owns NLS Logistics," he said. "It wasn't my parents. It was a holding company registered in Delaware." But the registered agent address was the same P.O. box in Northbridge that my parents were using now. I sat back, feeling a cold numbness spread through my limbs. They emptied the company. I whispered, before they even asked me to take the plea. Caleb nodded. They knew the investigation was coming, or they knew the audit was going to fail. So they moved the valuables into a lifeboat and left Bella Morgan on the sinking ship to explain why the hull was empty. Northline Supply, the company I went to prison to save, was a shell. I said, "I pleaded guilty to saving a ghost." "And the restitution?" Caleb asked. "I am paying restitution based on the losses of Northline Supply." I said, "But if Northline Supply had no assets because they transferred them out, then there was no loss." Caleb said, or at least, not the kind they claimed. "They stripped the copper wiring out of the house and then claimed insurance fraud when it burned down." I stared at the screen. The level of calculation was breathtaking. It wasn't just panic. It wasn't just messy bookkeeping. It was architectural. They had built a trapdoor, pushed me through it, and then walked out the front door with the furniture. "We need to prove the transfer was fraudulent," Caleb said. "We need to prove they moved the assets to avoid the liability. I know who can help." I said, "Mr. Henderson ran a gravel and landscaping supply yard on the edge of town. He had been one of Northline's oldest vendors. I remembered him as a man with calloused hands and a laugh that sounded like a bark. He had sent me a card when I graduated college. I found him in the yard office, arguing with a driver about a delivery ticket. When he saw me standing in the doorway, he stopped mid-sentence. He looked as if he had seen a ghost. "Bella," he said. "Hello, Mr. Henderson," I said. He dismissed the driver. He didn't offer me a seat. He stood behind his desk, crossing his arms over his chest. "I heard you were back," he said. "I am back." I said, "Look, Bella," he said, looking at his boots. "I can't get involved. Your dad told me about the trouble, the gambling. It is a shame. I didn't gamble. Mr. Henderson," I said, "you know me. You watched me grow up. People change," he said. "Drugs. Desperation. I do not judge, but I can't help you. We do business with NLS Logistics now. Big account. I can't lose it." I pulled a piece of paper from my folder. It was a photocopy of an invoice. "Do you recognize this?" I asked. He squinted at it. "Yeah, that is one of ours. From 3 years ago." "Look at the date," I said. "It is dated December, but look at the delivery manifest attached to it. The delivery was in August." He shifted his weight. "So? Clerical error. My mother asked you to backdate this, didn't she?" I asked. "She asked you to invoice it later so they could move the expense into the next tax year, or maybe so they could claim the cash flow was different for the bank." He turned red. "I do not know what you are talking about." I pulled out a second piece of paper. This one was a filing from the bankruptcy court, a draft that had never been finalized but was part of the discovery file Caleb had pulled. "This is a creditor list," I said. "It lists the entities that were cooperating with the restructuring of Northline Supply. Your name is on here, Mr. Henderson." "So?" he said, defensive. "If the state finds out that Northline Supply was moving assets to defraud the Department of Revenue," I said, keeping my voice level, "then anyone who knowingly altered financial records to assist them is a co-conspirator. Backdating an invoice to help a client hide assets is a felony." He stared at me. The color drained from his ruddy face. "You wouldn't," he whispered. "I am not the one who put your name on a filing." I said, "They did. They used you, just like they used me. And if this goes to a grand jury, they will throw you under the bus to save themselves. You know they will." He sat down heavily in his chair. He wiped sweat from his forehead with a dirty rag. "Elaine called me," he said. His voice was gruff. "She was crying. Said the bank was breathing down their necks. Said if I could just reissue the invoice for December, it would save the business. She said it was just a timing thing. Will you testify to that?" I asked. He looked at me. I can't lose this business. Bella, if you talk to me, maybe you won't, I said. But if the state investigator finds this invoice without your explanation, you go down with them. He looked at the invoice. She told me it was to help you, he said. She said you had messed up the books and they needed to fix it to keep you out of trouble. I closed my eyes for a second. Even their crimes were committed in my name. Write a statement, I said. Just the truth. That is all I need. Mara Penn was not what I expected. I had pictured a frazzled reporter with a notepad. Instead, she was a woman in her 40s with a sharp bob cut and expensive glasses. Sitting in a booth at the back of a diner in Northbridge, she had a tablet in front of her and a look of supreme boredom. She had agreed to meet me only after I sent her the timeline of the asset transfer. You have 10 minutes, she said when I sat down. I usually do not do wrongfully convicted stories. Everyone is innocent in prison. I am not innocent. I said, I signed the plea. She paused, looking up from her coffee. Okay, she said. That is a new opening. I am not here to tell you I didn't sign the papers. I said, I am here to tell you that the papers were part of a larger mechanism, a mechanism that is still running. I opened my bag. I didn't bring tissues. I didn't bring a photo of me as a child. I brought the data. I laid out the spreadsheet. Column A. I said, the date of the state investigation notice. Column B. The date of the asset transfer to NLS Logistics. Column C. The date of my plea deal. Column D. The date my parents bought a new condo in a gated community. Mara looked at the sheet. She traced the lines with a manicured finger. And this? She asked, pointing to the Hearthstone Consulting column. That is a shell company. I said, it was opened in my name while I was incarcerated. It has a credit line of $50,000. The payments on that credit line are being made from an account controlled by my father. Why would they pay a debt in your name? She asked. To build the credit score back up so they can max it out again, I said, or to launder money through a consultant that doesn't exist. She looked at me. Her eyes were intelligent, assessing. You are the fall guy who woke up. She said, I am the compliance officer who woke up. I corrected. She smiled. A small, shark-like smile. Do you have proof of the identity theft? She asked. Hard proof. Not just, it looks suspicious. I pulled out the notary log copy from Marisol Klein. This is the log from the night I signed the power of attorney. I said, I slid a second document next to it. It was the power of attorney document that had been filed with the bank to authorize the withdrawals. Look at the page count, I said. Mara leaned in. The notary log says, Power of attorney, 3 pages. She read. I pointed to the filed document. This document has 4 pages. I said, I flipped to the second page of the filed document. It contained a clause in dense legalese, granting the agent the specific authority to liquidate assets for the purpose of establishing trust entities. Regardless of beneficiary designation, that clause wasn't in the one I signed. I said, How do you know? Because I read it, I said, and because of the staple holes. I pointed to the top left corner of the filed document copy. Look at the photocopy of the staple marks. The first page has 3 sets of holes. The second page, the one with the magic clause, has only 1 set. They swapped the page, Mara whispered. They took the packet apart after the notary stamped the last page, inserted a new middle page with broader powers, and restapled it. It is document tampering, I said, and since they used it to cross state lines for banking, it is federal wire fraud. Mara sat back. She took a sip of her coffee. This isn't a local interest story, she said. This is a RICO case waiting to happen. Will you write it? I asked. Not yet, she said. I need to verify the filings. I need to talk to the notary myself, and I need a comment from NLS Logistics, if you call them. They will shred everything. I said, Let them shred, she said. Shredding is noisy, and I have friends in the district attorney's office who hate it when people treat the court like a vending machine. She reached out and took the folder. I am keeping this, she said. It is a copy. I said, I learned to never give up the originals. Smart girl, she said. The next blow came from the probate court. I had been checking the legal notices in the paper, a habit Tanya taught me. I saw a notice of final distribution for the estate of Sylvia Morgan, Aunt Sylvia. She was my father's sister, a quiet woman who had always been kind to me. She had died 6 months into my sentence. I hadn't been allowed to go to the funeral. I went to the county clerk's office and pulled the file. Sylvia had left a modest estate, mostly her house and some savings, her will. Dated 5 years ago, left $5,000 to me, to my niece Bella, for her music. I had played piano as a child. It was a sweet, personal gesture, but I had never received the money. I turned the page in the file. There was a petition filed by my parents. Petition for guardianship of funds. Petitioner states that the beneficiary, Bella Morgan, is currently incarcerated and legally incapacitated. Petitioner requests control of the bequest to be applied toward the beneficiary's outstanding restitution obligations. It was granted. The check for $5,000 had been issued to George Morgan as guardian for Bella Morgan. I checked the restitution log. The payment had never been made to the court. They had taken Aunt Sylvia's money she wanted me to have, and they had kept it. They had told the court they were paying my debt, and instead, they had pocketed it. It wasn't the amount. $5,000 wouldn't change my life. It was the intimacy of the theft. They had taken the last act of kindness someone had shown me and turned it into another transaction. I stood in the clerk's office, my hand gripping the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. This was theft dressed as care. This was the ultimate violation. I am done waiting. I said to myself. I walked out of the courthouse and went straight to the post office. I had prepared the packets, copies of the notary log, copies of the staple hole mismatch on the power of attorney, copies of the Hearthstone consulting registration, copies of Aunt Sylvia's probate petition versus the restitution log. I didn't send them to the police. The police in Cedar Hollow went to barbecues with my father. I sent them to the State Fraud Hotline. I sent them to the Department of Revenue, Enforcement Division. I sent them to the State Bar Association regarding the lawyer who filed the guardianship petition. It was the nuclear option, by filing formal whistleblower complaints. I was inviting the state to look at me again. If I was wrong, if I couldn't prove it, it would look like a vindictive felon harassing her victims. It could violate my parole, but I wasn't wrong. I mailed the envelopes. I heard them drop into the blue metal box with a heavy thud. 3 days later, my phone rang at work. It was Rena Holt, my parole officer. Morgan, she said. Her voice was sharp. In my office. Now. I left the packaging line. I drove to the probation office with my stomach in knots. When I walked in, Rena was standing behind her desk. She held a piece of paper. I got a call. She said, "From a lawyer representing your parents." I stood fast. I didn't fidget. "They are filing a formal complaint," she said. "They claim you are harassing them. They claim you are contacting their business partners and slandering them. They claim you are unstable. I haven't contacted them." I said, "They say you are threatening to destroy their business." Rena said, "They want a restraining order, and they want your parole revoked." I reached into my bag and pulled out my logbook. I opened it. "Here is a log of every person I have spoken to." I said, "I spoke to Mr. Henderson regarding a past invoice. That is not harassment. That is investigation. I have not called my parents. I have not visited their home. I do not even know their gate code." Rena looked at the log. It was meticulous. Times, dates, summaries of conversations. "I also have this," I said. I handed her a copy of the receipt for the whistleblower complaints I had mailed. I submitted formal evidence of identity theft and document tampering to the state authorities 3 days ago. I said, "My parents' complaint today is retaliation for those filings. They are trying to use you to silence a witness." Rena looked at the receipt. She looked at me. "You reported them to the Revenue Department?" she asked. "Yes. You know that if you are making false reports, you go back inside?" "I know." I said, "But I'm not making false reports. They altered a notarized document." "Ms. Holt? That is a felony. I am required by the terms of my probation to report criminal activity. Am I not? Raina stared at me for a long time. Then, the corner of her mouth twitched. Technically, yes, she said. She tossed the lawyer's letter onto her desk. I will tell them that I have investigated and found no evidence of parole violation, she said. But watch your back. Morgan. If they are hiring lawyers to call me, they are scared, and scared people bite. The atmosphere in Cedar Hollow began to shift. It was subtle, like the air pressure dropping before a storm. Mara Penn hadn't published her story yet, but she was asking questions. She was calling the bank. She was calling the zoning board about NLS logistics. Small towns run on gossip, and the gossip was changing. It wasn't poor George and Elaine anymore. It was, why is a reporter asking about George's warehouse transfer? I went to the grocery store on a Tuesday evening. I saw Mrs. Gable, the church secretary. Usually, she would look through me as if I were invisible. This time, she stopped. She looked at my cart. Pasta, store-brand sauce, apples. Hello, Bella. She said, hello, Mrs. Gable. I saw your mother the other day. She said, she seemed frazzled. I didn't say anything. She said you were causing trouble. Mrs. Gable continued, but you know, I always wondered about the organ fund. The organ fund? We raised money for a new organ last year. She said, George was the treasurer. The money just disappeared. He said it was an accounting error, but we never got the organ. She looked at me, her eyes wide behind her glasses. It wasn't you, was it? She whispered. The gambling. No, ma'am, I said softly. I never gambled. She nodded slowly. I didn't think so. You were always such a serious girl. She walked away. The cracks were forming. I came home from my shift at the plant at 4 a.m. My legs ached. There was an envelope taped to my apartment door. It wasn't mailed. It had no stamp. It was just a plain white envelope with Bella written on it in block letters. I took it inside. I locked the deadbolt. I checked the window. I opened it. Inside was a single photocopy. It looked like a page from an old ledger book. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was my father's cramped, aggressive scrawl. The columns were titled Operating Expenses, Inventory, and Bella File. Under Bella File, there was a list of dates and amounts. November 12th, Notary, $500, rejected. November 15th, Legal Retainer, Derek Sky, $5,000. December 1st, Transfer to Hearthstone, $12,000, January 10th, F150. Down payment, $4,500. It was a confession. It was a breakdown of exactly how much it cost to frame me, and how much they had profited from my identity. But it was the note clipped to the page that made my breath stop. It was typed on a scrap of paper. You were never supposed to come back angry. I stared at the paper. Who sent this? It wasn't my parents. They would never put this in writing. Was it Derek? Trying to cut a deal before the ship went down? Was it the secretary at the new office? Was it Sarah's mom? Finally growing a conscience? It didn't matter. Someone on the inside was watching. Someone knew that the Bella file wasn't closed. I took the ledger page and pinned it to the center of my timeline board. It was the keystone. It connected the notary bribe to the truck purchase. I touched the paper. You were never supposed to come back angry. They were right. I was supposed to come back broken. I was supposed to come back shameful and silent. Grateful for the scraps they threw me. But they forgot one thing. They had sent me to a school where the only subject was survival, and I had graduated with honors. I picked up my phone. I dialed Caleb. "Wake up," I said. "We have the smoking gun." The Cedar County Courthouse had not changed in 2 years. It still smelled of floor wax, old paper, and the nervous sweat of people waiting for their lives to be dismantled. The last time I had walked these marble floors, I was 33 years old, terrified, and convinced that taking the fall was an act of noble martyrdom. I had walked with my head down, shielding my face from the local reporters. Today, I walked with my head up, I wore a black blazer I had bought at a thrift store for $8. It was tailored and sharp. I wore my hair pulled back. I carried my accordion file not like a shield, but like a weapon. Caleb met me at the security checkpoint. He looked nervous, his tie slightly askew, but his eyes were bright behind his glasses. "Ready?" he asked. I touched the timeline board we had reduced to a binder of exhibits. "I have been ready for 730 days. I said. The hearing was technically a restitution review. My parents had petitioned the court to increase the garnishment of my wages, claiming I was falling behind on the agreed schedule because of my low income at the packaging plant. They wanted the court to force me to liquidate the few assets I had left. Specifically, they wanted to force a sale of future interests, which was a legal euphemism for the inheritance from Aunt Sylvia they had already stolen. It was a trap. They wanted to wring the rag dry. I saw them at the end of the hallway near the double doors of courtroom 4. My father was wearing his navy suit, the one he wore to weddings and funerals. My mother was in a soft pink cardigan, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. They were already performing for the audience of bailiffs and clerks. When they saw me, my father stiffened. He didn't look at me. He looked through me. But my mother whispered something to him and then detached herself. She walked toward me. Caleb stepped forward to intercept, but I put a hand on his arm. "It is okay," I said. My mother stopped 2 feet away. She smelled of lavender and hairspray. It was the smell of my childhood, the smell of safety, and now it made my skin crawl. "Bella," she said. Her voice was a soft, trembling whisper. "Hello." "Mother," I said. "Please," she said. Her eyes were wet, swimming with tears that looked genuinely pained. "Do not do this. Do not make a scene in there. Your father. His heart is not good. The stress is killing him. He looks healthy enough to cash checks." I said. She flinched. "Bella, listen to me. We can fix this. We have some money put aside. Cash. $10,000. We can give it to you today. You can move away. Start fresh somewhere else. Maybe the coast. You always wanted to go to the coast." I looked at her. $10,000. That was the price of my life. That was the hush money. "You want me to take a bribe to stop telling the truth?" I asked. "It is not a bribe," she hissed, her voice dropping an octave, the sweetness curdling instantly into venom. "It is help. We are trying to help you, you ungrateful child. After everything we did, we kept the business alive. We kept your name out of the papers as much as we could. And you come back here with your little lawyer and try to destroy us?" There it was. The mask was gone. Her eyes were hard, flat stones. "I am not trying to destroy you. Mother," I said, "I am just returning the favor." "You are garbage," she whispered. "You were always weak. That is why we had to do it. You couldn't handle the real world." I stepped closer. I was taller than her now, or maybe she just seemed smaller. 2 years in prison won't kill you," I said, repeating the line she had watched my father say at the kitchen table. She stepped back as if I had slapped her. "But it did kill me." I said, "The Bella you knew is dead. You are talking to the evidence." I walked past her, through the double doors, and took my seat at the defendant's table. The judge was the same one who had sentenced me, Judge Holloway. He looked older, grayer, and even more bored. He flipped through the file on his bench, looking at me over his reading glasses with a mixture of annoyance and fatigue. "Ms. Morgan," he said, "we are here because the victims, Northline Supply, represented by Mr. and Mrs. Morgan, claim you are in default of your restitution obligations. They are requesting an enforcement order." He looked at the plaintiff's table. My parents sat there, holding hands. Their lawyer, a slick man named Mr. Doyle, who played golf with the mayor, stood up. "Your Honor," Mr. Doyle said, "the victims have been incredibly patient. Their daughter embezzled nearly $500,000. They have tried to be supportive, but they have learned that Ms. Morgan is working and refusing to pay the full percentage. She is also harassing them with frivolous complaints to state agencies. They just want what is owed so they can rebuild the business she almost destroyed." Judge Holloway looked at me. Ms. Morgan? What do you have to say? Caleb stood up. Your Honor, Caleb said. His voice was steady, though I saw his hand trembling slightly on the table. We dispute the default, but more importantly, we dispute the validity of the restitution amount itself. We have new evidence suggesting that the victims in this case have engaged in systematic fraud to manufacture the debt, and that the assets they claim were lost were actually transferred to shell entities under their control. The judge frowned. Mr. Nguyen, this is a review hearing, not an appeal. The conviction stands. The debt is adjudicated. We are not arguing the conviction today. Your Honor, Caleb said, we are arguing that the plaintiffs are coming to this court with unclean hands. They are using this court to launder money. That is outrageous, my father shouted. He half rose from his chair. Sit down. Mr. Morgan, the judge snapped. Mr. Nguyen, the judge said, his voice dropping to a warning tone. That is a serious accusation. You better have something better than a theory. We have the notary, Caleb said. He picked up the first exhibit. Your Honor, I present the sworn affidavit and journal logs of Marisol Klein, a licensed mobile notary. Caleb walked the documents to the bench. On November 12th, 2 years ago, the night the power of attorney was signed, Ms. Klein notarized a second document, a personal statement by Bella Morgan, explicitly stating she was signing under duress and denying the underlying theft. This document was witnessed by the plaintiffs. So, Mr. Doyle scoffed. A criminal writing a note saying, I didn't do it, doesn't prove anything. Caleb didn't look at him. Miss Klein also testified in this affidavit regarding the physical state of the power of attorney document. Caleb continued, the document presented to the bank, the one used to drain Ms. Morgan's accounts, contains 4 pages. The entry in Ms. Klein's journal confirms she notarized a 3-page document. The courtroom went quiet. The judge stopped flipping pages. Furthermore, Caleb said, holding up the macro photography prints we had made, the staple holes on the bank document do not match. The signature page has 3 sets of holes. The page granting authority to liquidate assets has only 1. The document was disassembled, altered, and reassembled after notarization. That is document tampering, Your Honor. And since it was used to access federally insured funds, it is bank fraud. Let me see that. The judge said. He took the photos. He adjusted his glasses. He looked at the notary log, then at the bank filing. Mr. Doyle, the judge said, looking at my parents' lawyer, can you explain this discrepancy? I have not seen this evidence, Your Honor. Mr. Doyle stammered. This is an ambush. It is a public record, Caleb said. And there is more, Caleb added. We have a sworn statement from Mara Penn, an investigative journalist for the Chronicle. Mara stood up in the gallery. She wasn't allowed to speak, but her presence was a statement. She nodded to the judge. Ms. Penn has verified that the assets of Northlane Supply, the company Ms. Morgan allegedly destroyed, were transferred to a new entity, NLS Logistics, 3 weeks before the plea deal was signed. The transfer included all vehicles, client lists, and inventory. The victim company was an empty shell when the restitution order was signed. The judge looked at my parents. My father's face was turning a dark, dangerous red. My mother was gripping the table so hard her knuckles were white. This is irrelevant, my father blurted out. We reorganized. It is standard business. Sir, address the court through your counsel, the judge barked. At that moment, the heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom opened. A man in a gray suit walked in. He didn't look like a lawyer. He looked like government. He walked past the bar, straight to the prosecutor's table. He whispered something to the assistant district attorney, who was there just to observe. The ADA stood up. She looked pale. Your Honor, she said, the state requests a sidebar, or rather a continuance. What is this? Judge Holloway asked. This is Special Agent Miller from the State Department of Revenue, Criminal Investigations Division. The ADA said. Agent Miller stepped forward. Your Honor, he said. His voice was dry, flat, and carried to every corner of the room. We have opened an active inquiry into the financial activities of Northline Supply, NLS Logistics, and Hearthstone Consulting. My father made a sound like a strangled cat. Based on evidence received via the whistleblower hotline, evidence we have corroborated, we are investigating a multi-state scheme involving identity theft, tax evasion, and the fraudulent use of court-ordered restitution to launder assets. Launder assets? The judge repeated. Yes, Your Honor. Agent Miller said, it appears the restitution payments being demanded from Ms. Morgan are being funneled into a shell account that is paying for personal vehicles and real estate registered to the plaintiffs. The judge looked at my parents. His expression had shifted from boredom to cold fury. There is nothing a judge hates more than being used as a tool for a crime. Mr. Doyle, the judge said, I suggest you advise your clients of their Fifth Amendment rights immediately. It was over. I knew it. Caleb knew it. But my father didn't know it. He stood up. He slammed his hands on the table. This is a lie, he screamed. He pointed a shaking finger at me. She is doing this. She is destroying this family. We did everything for her. We saved her from prison. Sit down. Sir? The bailiff moved forward. I saved the business, my father yelled, his voice cracking. I moved the money because I had to. The taxes were killing us. I did what any businessman would do. And we used her name because she was part of the family. It was family money. The courtroom froze. He had just admitted it. I moved the money. We used her name. In his rage, in his desperate need to be the victim, he had confessed to the underlying crime. He had admitted that the theft was actually a strategic move to hide assets from taxes. Caleb looked at the court reporter. Did you get that? The reporter nodded. Typing furiously, my mother pulled at my father's arm, trying to silence him, but he shook her off. She owes us, he screamed. She is nothing without us. Mr. Morgan, you are in contempt, the judge shouted. Bailiff, remove him. 2 bailiffs grabbed my father by the arms. He was still shouting as they dragged him toward the doors. It is my money. It is my business. You can't touch me. My mother looked around, wild-eyed. She looked at the judge, then at me. She didn't look like a victim anymore. She looked like a rat on a sinking ship. She grabbed her purse and ran after my father, her heels clacking frantically on the marble. The doors swung shut. The silence that followed was heavy and ringing. Agent Miller cleared his throat. Your Honor, he said. In light of the outburst and the cooperating testimony we have received. Cooperating testimony? The judge asked. From a Mr. Derek Voss. Agent Miller said. I felt a jolt of electricity. Mr. Voss was detained yesterday on unrelated charges. Miller continued. He has provided a proffer. He indicates that the scheme to frame Ms. Morgan was premeditated. He has provided emails and ledgers. He claims he was hired by George Morgan to construct the Bella file specifically to shield the company from a state audit. Derek Voss, the man in the shiny suit, the man who had forwarded my emails. He had flipped. He had saved his own skin by serving up my parents. I looked at the judge. He was looking at me. For the first time, he didn't see a convict. He saw a woman who had been buried alive. This hearing is suspended, the judge said. His voice was quiet. I am ordering a full review of the restitution order. I am freezing all assets of Northline Supply and NLS Logistics pending the outcome of the state investigation. He paused. Ms. Morgan, he said. Yes, Your Honor. I stood up. This court takes these allegations very seriously. If what I heard today is true, a grave miscarriage of justice has occurred in this room. He didn't say, you are innocent. He couldn't. Not yet. The wheels of the law grind slowly, but he had stopped the crushing weight that was on my back. We are adjourned, he said. He banged the gavel. It sounded like a gunshot. But this time, I wasn't the one falling. I walked out of the courthouse into the bright afternoon sun. The air tasted sweet. Mara Penn was waiting on the steps. She was typing on her phone. Front page tomorrow, she said without looking up. The family business. How a Cedar Hollow couple framed their daughter. Good headline. I said, you know they are going to arrest them, right? she said. After that outburst? And Voss talking? It is a matter of days. I know. I said, "How do you feel?" she asked. "Do you feel vindicated?" I thought about it. I thought about the 2 years in the cell. I thought about the smell of bleach and the sound of keys. I thought about the Aunt Sylvia money they stole. I don't feel vindicated. I said, "I just feel light." Caleb came out behind me. He looked exhausted but happy. "We did it. Bella," he said. "We stopped the bleeding. We did." I said, "Thank you." "Caleb, I have to go back to the clinic," he said. "But call me? When the charges drop? We need to file for exoneration. That is the next fight. The next fight. There was always a next fight." I watched him walk away. "Ms. Morgan?" I turned. It was Agent Miller, the man from the Revenue Department. He was standing by a black sedan, smoking a cigarette. He looked tired. That was quite a show in there. He said, "It wasn't a show." I said, "It was the truth. I know," he said. "We have the ledger page you sent, the one with the Bella file column." I nodded. "You know," he said, dropping the cigarette and crushing it with his heel. "Derek Voss gave us a lot. He gave us the bank accounts. He gave us the fake invoices. But he said something interesting." "What?" I asked. "He said he didn't send you that ledger page." I froze. He said he would never have put that in writing. Miller said, "He is too smart for that. He said that handwriting, the note about coming back angry, that wasn't him." "Then who sent it?" I asked. Miller looked at me. His eyes were gray and unreadable. He said there was a third partner. Miller said, "Silent partner. Someone who financed the initial buyout of the inventory. Someone who holds the mortgage on your parents' new condo." "Who?" "We are working on it," Miller said. "But the name, it keeps popping up in other files, other busts. It seems your parents were just franchisees in a bigger operation. And whoever that partner is, they wanted you to have that ledger. They wanted you to take your parents down." "Why?" I whispered. "Maybe your parents were becoming a liability." Miller said, "Maybe they were too greedy. Loose ends. You were the perfect weapon to cut them loose." He opened his car door. "You got justice today, Ms. Morgan," he said. "But just be careful. You knocked down the front door. But you do not know who is standing in the hallway behind it." He got in the car and drove away. I stood on the sidewalk. The sun was still shining. The birds were still singing. But a chill wind blew through my blazer. I looked at the timeline board in my hands. I had closed the loop. I had proven the fraud. I had destroyed the people who destroyed me. But the ledger page, you were never supposed to come back angry. It wasn't a taunt. It was an instruction, or a test. I walked to the bus stop. I had to get back to the packaging plant. I had a shift at 6. I sat on the bench and watched the cars pass. My parents were going to prison. I was going to be free. But as I watched a black SUV slow down near the corner, tinted windows reflecting the world back at me, I realized that freedom wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of a much larger, darker chapter. I tightened my grip on the file. Let them come, I thought. I have plenty of paper left. Thank you for listening to Bella's story. It has been a long journey from the betrayal at the kitchen table to the reckoning in the courtroom. I would love to know, where are you listening from today? Drop your country or city in the comments below, and I want to hear your thoughts. Do you think Bella should keep digging to find the silent partner, or should she take her freedom and run? If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories for more tales of betrayal and justice. Until next time. Remember, the truth is always in the paperwork.